Entering the world of VR can be a terrifying prospect. To reintroduce this new tech, 505 Games has Adrift, a narratively dazzling game that divides horror and puzzles into a hidden space odyssey. Joining us today, Adam Orth, the founder, creative director of Adrift. He's the mind behind it with his team. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and find out about Adrift.
Absolutely. So what can you tell us? What's the elevator pitch for this game? There's so many different ways. Everyone wants to spend their money as quickly as they can. You know, why should they spend it on Adrift?
So Adrift is the story of an astronaut who wakes up floating in space amongst the debris of this totally destroyed space station with no memory of how she got there and a badly damaged EVA suit that's slowly leaking oxygen. And your goals in Adrift are simply to stay alive and get home. And you accomplish that by exploring this completely decimated environment in orbit above Earth for precious resources and repairing your suit and repairing mainframe computers to power up the escape craft to go home. Along the way, you learn the stories of your deceased crewmates, and through their stories, you learn who you are and what happened. So it's really a narrative-driven exploration game set in a really beautiful and terrifying environment.
What would be the best way to describe the gameplay? Because I think you really set the stage of what we're going to be doing, the characters involved, the minute-to-minute gameplay of this game. What's it like?
Yeah, the minute-to-minute gameplay of the game is really it's about traversal. We've built a really compelling control system to move the player through this destroyed world with their propulsion pack. And what's unique about it is it's zero gravity and it's 360 degrees. You can literally go in any direction, anytime that you want. So we really tried to simulate what it's like to be a human in space. And one of the mechanics that we have is an oxygen mechanic. So because your suit is always slowly leaking oxygen, you need to always kind of be mindful of that and find oxygen canisters and oxygen stations to kind of replenish what's in your suit so you can keep going. And unfortunately, because your suit's damaged, the oxygen is a shared resource for propulsion also. So you really have to always kind of be thinking about your movement, and every movement matters. You have to make all these little micro decisions based on, do I need to expel the oxygen by using my thrust, or can I float over there and get to my goal before the air in my suit expires? So it's really kind of a stressful exploration where you're encouraged to explore in Adrift, but it's not a normal exploration game in the sense that you really have to think about risk versus reward with what you're going to go and find. Maybe you go out to a floating piece of debris and there's a narrative element over there, and you really have to kind of come to terms with like the cost of that and the risk of that and what that means. So when you get there, it really is truly a reward because you survived and you made it and you've got another piece of the story, and now you're kind of ready for the next challenge.
That's interesting. So you're trying to essentially have that balance between narrative exploration and gameplay. Where is that line? Because I could imagine if you go too much in either direction, it would be difficult for players to not get frustrated with a mechanic that can be so punishing, miss out on some of the narrative experience, whereas if you go the other way, they won't have enough of a challenge to be pushed in that line. So did you guys kind of experiment with getting it to that point?
Yeah, we did. We really did a lot, actually. And almost right up until launch. So it's something that is really important for us to put in the game because we all worked on huge video games before kind of coming together and forming our own studio. A lot of people in our studio worked on Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, God of War, a bunch of games with Blizzard. So we all have a rich history of mechanics and systems and making games that that utilize that. But we wanted to step out of our comfort zone and make a narrative game. And we didn't want to fall into the trap of, well, it's just floating around and listening to stuff and looking at stuff. We really wanted to have a compelling gameplay element to there in the thing. And that's where the movement mechanic and the oxygen mechanic come in, because it really does add a level of skill and balance to the game where you are responsible for your choices based on your actions, and there is a mastery of controls there, and there's a second to second gameplay element of just simply moving through the world. And I think that's one of the things that makes our game really different than some of the other kind of immersive narrative games that have come before us. And we really wanted to put our stamp on the genre, and I think we succeeded there.
Absolutely. I am talking again with Adam Orth, the founder, creative director, working on the game Adrift. A lot of people talking about it. It's a big push into VR, one of the launch titles available. I feel like I speak with so many different developers that come from the big studios, and almost without fail, each of them kind of partitions off into these smaller teams and make games that are narratively driven. You're part of this industry. You see from the inside out. Why do you think that is? You guys made a choice for that, but why do you think that kind of overall so many developers are making that choice?
Well, excuse me. It's pretty simple. Game developers are insanely driven, creative people who want to invite you into worlds and stories that you couldn't exist otherwise. And when you have those kind of creative people working on a giant game, on a team of 400 people, the amount that you are able to personally contribute to that thing, to put your personal touch and your personality and your soul into a big kind of tentpole project game, it's very hard to affect the finished product that way. And I think eventually game developers they run a course and they're like, I can't do this anymore. I have something to say. I want to do something unique and special and different. And that's not to say that that doesn't exist on big AAA games, but after a while, there's only so many meetings you can go to, and there's only so many, being one person on a big giant team, if you really want to affect change and put your stamp on the game, then you have to move up in the ranks. And you can't do that if you're focused purely on developing video games. You have to start playing politics and navigating through the corporate thing. And that has nothing to do with making art and making games and making beautiful new things. So I think that's what drives people like myself and the rest of my team, and an endless stream of developer colleagues that I know out of the big business into the smaller thing, because it's so much easier now to make games on your own. The tools and the avenues that we have to publish games digitally now don't require a giant publisher or a giant staff. Like, if you make a good game and you have something unique and interesting to say, it's possible that you can be successful with it.
There you go. And again, thank you so much, Adam Orth. We're speaking with him all about his game Adrift. We do have to take a quick break. We're going to be back with him and discuss VR, virtual reality. This game uses it. He's going to give us the ins and outs of that development, what it's like, and why you should pick it up. Again, Andy Borkowski, VGS Talk Radio, AM 640. We're back here on VGS, entering the world of VR. As you heard before the break, we're speaking with Adam Orth. He's founder, creator of the game Adrift, an exciting hidden space odyssey. You deal with horror, you deal with puzzles, really, really intriguing. And it's also on virtual reality, specifically the Steam Oculus Rift. How was that experience, Adam, creating tech and creating art, like you said before the break, on such an innovative and new platform?
It was terrifying. As game developers, we've had a language and a rhythm of making games for a certain way for a couple decades now, and VR has completely blown that out, and everything is new and different again. And I think that the presence of this VR technology has allowed games like Adrift and all these other wonderful new VR games that are entering the marketplace to exist where they couldn't before. And that's because VR has this incredible ability to put you into an experience where you never could be before. And I feel like the game landscape is going to change rapidly because of VR, because of the things we can do now, and because of the way developers are kind of reignited creatively with this new technology. We're getting all these new and unique experiences that never could have happened without VR. And the landscape of what a game is about to change all over again. It's super exciting to be a developer at this time because, if you take an example, like as gamers and developers, we know what it's like to play a game and open a door or build a game and build a door that you can open. But in VR, it's a monumental new experience because you can do it so many different ways. And you, as a developer and a creator, you have to approach this thing that you've known for decades in a brand new way, like we're starting over again. And the unique part about starting over again is we haven't lost any of our knowledge and skills. We just have to look at problems a new way, because that's really what a game designer is someone who creates and solves problems for a player to kind of interact with. And
sorry to interrupt you there, Adam. Specifically in your game, in Adrift, what were some of you alluded to it there about, completely new ways that you have to deal with problems. What were some of the ways that Adrift is able to provide a gameplay experience that isn't something that's nauseating? Because so much of it in virtual reality has to do with movement and intensity. And I've played the game a lot on Steam. It's a very, very intense game, second to second. How did you make it so that it works well in VR without being pushed too far that some gamers might lose their lunch?
There's a couple of different ways. Number one is you have to build incredibly solid software. And we have a great team who knows how to get the most out of the Unreal Engine 4, which is what we use to build Adrift. And basically what you need, the formula for comfort in VR is the highest frame rate and refresh rate possible on screen with the kind of slowest restriction of movement. And a floating, dreamy space game is very perfect for VR because there's no fast, twitchy movements of the camera, which means that your brain and your eyes are always in sync. And then the frame rate of our game is super, super high, much higher than the floor, which is kind of 90 frames. And that allows us to have a really smooth running game that allows people to do things and move in a 360-degree direction in zero gravity without feeling bad, right? And
really?
But it's worth mentioning that not everyone's the same with VR, right? Some people can't ride in the back of a car without feeling car sick, right? It's not going to work for some people. But we spent a lot of time working closely with Oculus and their engineers to bring the very best VR experience to their platform with Adrift, and we feel like we're very successful there, and very proud of not a lot of people feeling bad from our game.
That's always an accomplishment, but it is interesting to hear a lot of the challenges that are coming with this new medium. But you're right on the edge of innovation. So, of course, there's going to be a learning curve. Playing a game like this, yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on it in VR. Before we let you go, we have a little bit more time. I wanted to touch on some of your history and past, not to, bring up the past in that way, but anytime I look at reviews or Steam reviews of games that you've made like this, there's always an allusion to statements you've made in the past at your previous jobs. It's got to be frustrating that so much of the work you do now is being held to a standard that has nothing to do with the work you're doing now. I wouldn't be able to deal with it well. How's that process been as a creator, as an artist, to constantly have, at least in some cases, that little niggling voice?
It's actually a really good meter for me. I'm assuming you're alluding to my Microsoft Twitter gaffe in 2013.
If you don't mind, could you, if you have a quick second, could you familiarize the audience of exactly what I'm talking about? They probably know, but I thought it'd be better to, give your assessment of it. And I wanted to just spend a short time because this is about Adrift and what this game does. But
well, actually, that topic is where Adrift came from, so I'm happy to talk about it.
Interesting.
The game is actually about this incident that I had where I kind of spoke out of turn on Twitter about something that was kind of a hot topic in the game industry in terms of needing an internet connection to use a video game console. At the time, I was a creative director at Microsoft working on interactive television, and I said something on Twitter that I shouldn't have. We hear these stories all the time today about the internet mob kind of caving in people's lives based on things they said online they maybe shouldn't have, and I made a mistake, and that happened to me, and it destroyed my life for a little while, and that's where Adrift comes from. The destroyed space station is a total, what I think, obvious metaphor for what happened in my life at the time, and being alone and having to navigate through that and get through it and be okay and kind of learn from it and grow from it. That's really what Adrift is all about, and that's where the game came from. So, it does come up in every comment and every review, but hey, I'm used to it. It happens every day, no matter what I do. So it doesn't seem like it's ever going to go away. But it also makes me work harder because I have more to prove to people. And I'm not proud that happened, but I also am not going to shy away from the fact that it's given me an opportunity to turn a really huge negative into a positive. And that's how I live my life. And I don't shy away from it because it's an important moment in life, and you can't go back and rewind time and do things. So you either curl up in a ball and let it roll over you, or you dust yourself off and you try to find a way to make something positive out of it. And that's what I did with Adrift.
Well, that is a good attitude to have with any kind of consternation you deal with in life. Quickly, before we finish up the interview here, do you have, I guess, a message? Because you're given a platform here. You get to speak about your game, but also about that incident that happened and the constant everyday comments that are levied towards you. Is there anything you'd like to say, I guess, to the people that still to this day bring up the comments you made 3 years ago at a different job?
No, there's really nothing.
No.
Nothing you can say to those people because, they're only just taking the opportunity to try to take you down, and life's too short to take time to kind of, let that get to me. It did before, but I've moved past it now, and I'm sorry that some other people on the internet can't.
There you go. And again, Adrift, make sure you pick it up. Where is the game available, sir?
The game is available currently on Steam and through the Oculus Rift home store. So we just announced today that the game will be coming to the HTC Vive VR platform in May. And the game is also coming to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One a little bit later in the year.
No excuse not to play it. Big thanks again to Adam Orth, founder, creative director on the game Adrift. An amazing foray into the world of VR. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Andy Borkowski, VGS Talk Radio, AM 640.